What is going on, guys? Today we are back with another video. We are sitting in the office and it's going to kind of be a Tom Talks of sort. Just got in from a long day of fishing. It is finally very fall-like out. Lows in the 20s, highs in the upper 30s and 40s, and I like this kind of weather a lot. And so do the fish. The bite's pretty much been good everywhere I've pretty much been going. Whether that's, where have I been in the last week? Been up on Leech. Actually fished pool 4 for a day and a half on the Mississippi. Caught some fish there. We'll do a video on that soon. And then fished kind of around northern Wisconsin, a couple different lakes, caught a bunch of fish. So bite's pretty much good everywhere, and can't complain about that. And yeah, but today what I kind of wanted to do the video on, I get a lot of YouTube comments, questions, obviously, and I pretty much read every single one. Now, I don't reply to as many of them as I probably should, but I read every single one. And a lot of times if I see a lot of questions going in one direction, I almost always make a video on that, or answer that question in a video type of thing. So I'm very aware of what people want to see, and I'm very aware of the questions you guys have, and a lot of it obviously pertains to, you know, exactly what we film, and a lot of it pertains to Humminbird stuff. And I always try to film a ton of Humminbird, a ton of electronic stuff. It sounds like you guys really like the Christopher's video one. I was thinking about making that video, not totally without that comment. I wanted to make a how to find fish on a large shallow flat in the fall video, pretty much all fall. The problem with filming those videos is you need really good lighting. You need really dim, dull lighting to be able to record the graph really well. So I was kind of waiting on that. And then Christopher's comment came in, and it was just like the perfect segue into that video. So it sounds like you guys like that one. Honestly, after watching it and editing it, and watching it again, it probably was one of the better how to read fish on side imaging on a flat videos. I mean, probably on the internet, to be honest, and that's not me bragging or anything like that. I could care less, but it came together really well, and the fish showed up really well. And a lot of those images you saw in that video, I'll go ahead and link this video down below if you haven't watched it yet, pertain to just almost every single body of water you're going to fish in the fall, or a lot of them, especially if you're on a large natural lake or a small natural lake or a flowage system, or really anything kind of outside of rivers. Rivers would kind of be the only body of water that wouldn't really fish a ton like that. But a lot of good information in that video. Anyways, back to the comments we always get on YouTube all the time. Like I said, I read every single one of them. And in this video, we're just going to kind of go through and answer some of these questions that we've been getting a lot. Kind of just a little me and you sitting here, and we're going to answer some good YouTube questions. So I kind of wrote down some of the ones that keep getting asked over and over. And where are we going to start here? Where are we going to start? Tom, do you use live scope while walleye fishing? Do you think there is a benefit to it? I do not. I've been in plenty of boats where guys do use live scope. I'm very familiar with what it is. I've kind of been waiting for Humminbirds to get into my boat for a little while now, and I'm very excited about that. This technology, it's a directional sonar. So it's not like side imaging, which is reading side to side. It's not like 360, which is reading in a circle. And each piece of electronics you have in your boat's a tool, whether that's a GPS, whether that's a sonar, whether that's down imaging, side imaging, 360, or live scope, live, or active target, depending on which brand you're going to be fishing with. They all have their use. And the one thing I think that you see live scope or this technology does is it can turn trolling bites into a casting bite. If that makes sense. It can take fish that are very scattered, and you can get on that trolling motor on 10 and hunt that water column with your directional sonar and make casts to these fish. So a lot of times, or whether you're fishing a big flat where you're just flying around and you want to see how that fish reacts to your bait. Now, 360 is phenomenal when you're fishing large, shallow water flats that are relatively clean, or it's like a weed edge and the fish are on that, or it's a sand to gravel line and the fish are relating to that line. 360 is phenomenal for that. In my opinion, probably the best of all time. Now, when you start talking about something like live scope, it's one of those things, and this is how I always describe it to people. It's obviously a massive tool, but it's one of those things that sells itself. And it's almost like fishing with like the Acme hyper rattles, like all those jig and wrap hyper rattle videos where you see somebody drop the bait and like half a second later they're already reeling in a walleye, and you're like, was this magic or what was that? It's a presentation that sells itself. Live scope's kind of the same thing. Now, what you have to decipher is how much of that is useful and how much of that is fish you would not have caught with a different kind of technology. So watching a fish coming up and eating a slip bobber after you locate a pod and watching them on live scope is super cool to watch. It's super cool to watch that fish come up in 18 feet of water to 15 feet, bite your leech, and then you look over and your bobber's going down because you can actively see it happen. Now, could you have caught that fish without live scope? For sure. Does you watching that fish come and bite the bait make a difference in you catching the fish? Probably not sometimes. So that's the kind of differences that you gotta think about. But it's absolutely a technology which will take over, and it's almost like side imaging when it came out. Like everybody's like, oh, you got that side imaging yet? And some people had it, some people didn't. And then when it got good enough to really be reading fish, pretty much anywhere you're gonna go, then everybody got it. This is gonna be the same way. In 5 years, we're all gonna be sitting here, we're all gonna have it on our boats. And it's going to give you the ability to find fish in the water column that you couldn't previously find. It's going to give you the ability to turn bites that used to be trolling bites into casting bites. And those are, in my opinion, a couple of the biggest differences that this live imaging or live scope or live or active target are really going to give you as an angler. And I always reference one thing when I'm dealing with bites where it's kind of not as good of a bite, or you're dealing with really scattered fish. And that's turning not a lot of fish into a lot of fish. And what I mean by that is, like the bite and leech, for example. There were sometimes we were around a lot of fish, but a lot of times we were taking pods of 3 fish and catching them so many times and so efficiently that it made it look like a lot of fish. And that's kind of what live scope's doing. And it's just going to make you more efficient in certain specific situations, in my opinion. So yes, you'll definitely see it on my boat soon, and very excited to give you guys some hardcore kind of looks at that. So moving on. Can you mention water temp turnover and how you fish through it? So turnover is kind of, in my area, it's kind of happening right now. Although in my opinion, now I'm not a scientist, I'm not a biologist, I don't know anything about any of that stuff. I just kind of know what fish generally do and what they're doing. And what happens in turnover is you have highly oxygenated water, less oxygenated water, a flip comes, generally colder water, warmer water, and this mixing happens in the fall. This year what's happened, I got the wood stove going, so it's just so dry in here right now. This year what seems to have happened is we've had these water temps that have just lingered and lingered and lingered, like in the upper 50s, low 60s for a really long time. And it's like this water top to bottom has really just kind of like equalized, or it's really just, it's mixed on itself. And that water temp, it's the same temperature for a very long ways down in the water column. So a lot of lakes, I think you're going to have a really weak turnover if you're going to have one at all. I think that water is just slowly kind of almost blended together as our water temps just sat at this point for such a long time. And turnover doesn't happen in every lake. Turnover happens really depending on what area you're in fewer lakes than you probably think it happens in. And a lot of your deeper, real deep basin-oriented lakes that are relatively large, that have large portions of that basin very deep, those lakes definitely experience a turnover. In my area, generally I see the thermocline start setting up noticeably in mid to late June, kind of a little shallower than 20 feet, and it'll slowly drives its way down to about 32 feet, and then slowly, well, it just kind of flips normally this time of year when you get water temps mid 50s to upper 50s. And I'm just not seeing that hard line variance. Turnover probably should have happened like right now in my area, and I'm not seeing a lot of it. How do you fish through it? Generally, you forget the deep bite and you go really shallow, in my opinion. And I love fishing shallow, so whenever there's a shallow water opportunity, I'm almost always fishing the shallow water bite. Those deep fish will be a lot more touch and go in turnover. So a lot of times fishing shallow water during turnover will end up putting more fish in your boat. Generally, shallow water fish are a little bit more bitey as well, really late in the fall. And I was going to say something else of value just now that I totally forgot. Oh, a lot of times when I get asked questions like fishing through difficulty, you fish through a cold front. Well, a lot of the same things always apply. Most of the time when I'm fishing, when I'm doing the physical act of casting the bait out or trolling or jigging, I am almost making sure every time I'm casting out that my bait's like really close to fish. So when you do that, you're not really worried too much about where are the fish, because you just drive till you find the fish and then you're fishing in the fish. At least that's kind of how it works through in my brain. So I don't really try to dive too deep into location. I just try to make sure that when I am fishing, my bait is always right around fish. So that's a lot of times how you kind of you become better through fishing in tough times, and that's kind of how I fish through turnover. So going on to question number 3, hopefully you guys kind of like that. I got to cross this off, or we're definitely going to reread through the same ones. How about river system locations during the fall? So we got an amazing project, and I've kind of been talking about it a little bit in some videos. I've been working on top of the YouTube doing just this incredible project, which will be coming out sometime in the spring that I'm just unbelievably excited about. And we just filmed a bunch of this kind of cool stuff. But river systems in the fall. So the same migration that you think about, and it's less of a migration. In river, you probably call it migration. In a natural lake, you probably just call it progression or movement. In a river system, where are the hot spots in your river in early spring? We could probably all answer that question. Upriver, dams, tight neck downs, things like that, spawning locations. Generally, these fish will move upriver in the spring or throughout the winter, and they'll kind of sit up here. And progressively, as you move into early summer, the fish start to filter downriver. As you get into midsummer, the fish are in some of the deeper portions downriver. Generally, in the fall, they suck back up to these areas. A lot of these movements are bait fish oriented, and you see it a lot, pretty much no matter whatever big river you're on, whether that's Pool 4, where I was down this week, down in Red Wing, whether that, really wherever that is, whether you're fishing like something like the Fox River in Green Bay, where you have a lot of these fish coming back into the river system from the lake. It's the same migration. These fish are a lot of times following bait, and it's just kind of a natural push. So the same progression happens that happens in these lakes as it does in the spring. In the spring on lakes, you're fishing a shoreline. Generally in the middle of summer, you're out in the middle. Generally by fall, you're back up on a shoreline. Same progression that happens in both places. It's just different situations that it's happening in. At least that's kind of the way I attack rivers in the fall and when I'm looking for location. What kind of dog is Stella? This is a little different question, but it's been asked 100,000 times in the last couple videos. She is a German short-hair pointer, and Shelby wanted that dog so bad that we had to get it. I was not in favor of getting two dogs. Two dogs heavily complicates traveling, and especially when you have a German short-hair pointer. Anybody who has a German short-hair pointer knows this. They're incredibly, insanely active wild dogs. They are freaks. You could run this dog 25, 30 miles a day, get her home, and she could run 20, 30 miles in the backyard after we get done. Insane dogs. Are they awesome family dogs? They're awesome family dogs, but they are absolutely insane. So if you're going to get a German short-hair pointer, make sure you can work that little bugger out. All right. I'm seeing fish deep in my lake, but not shallow. Am I missing something? So fall is a notorious time where you have something called a split bite. At least I always call it a split bite. A lot of times you'll have bites in very deep water and very shallow water. And sometimes you'll see it happen, both of them happening on the same lake. Sometimes one lake will fish better shallow. Sometimes one lake will fish better deep. I got 3 primary lakes in my area that I fish a lot, kind of within 10, 15 minutes of my house. They're all basically the same as far as how they're set up. 2 of those lakes have really strong shallow bites. One has just a really strong deep bite where the fish are all there. They're just really finicky to catch. And they're all set up the same. Why does one have one and not the other? Couldn't tell you why, but it does. So don't be surprised if you see me fishing in 5, 10, 12, 15 feet of water all the time on weed edges, and you go out in your lake and you're like, man, there's no fish here. Drive out to the first hump that tops out at 26, 28, 30, 32 feet of water, hard bottom structure, and start looking at that, because a lot of times if those fish aren't shallow, they're just magnetized to those deep, hard bottom structures that are very adjacent to very deep water, the deepest basins in the lake. Go look at some of those big rock humps out in the middle. And like I said, sometimes one lake will have one bite, sometimes one lake will have both bites. Another good question. What mount did you use for your 360? This is one question I've seen asked a lot. So I'm running the universal mount, as I think what they call it. I'll link it down below for my 360. And it's Geiger Tech makes it, but I think Humminbird just partnered with them, and they just comes as kind of a packaged unit. And I like it. One thing I would do is I spray my 360 pull down with like a silicone spray, and that seems to make it slide through there better. If I don't do that, then you got to kind of wiggle it down a little bit more if it's not wet. Once it's wet, it just goes up and down really, really simple. And then what I did from there is, because I wanted it kind of in the back of my boat, or I wanted to be able to move it around. I thought I'd move it around my boat more than I would, but I just never really found the need to do that. I took it 2 Alumatrack brackets, and I made like a 3/8 inch aluminum beam that ran between them. So it's really stable. I can run with it tipped over on the side of my boat, and then it's super simple just to tip it down, put it in the water, obviously, from there. And if I wanted to, I could slide that thing pretty much wherever I want my boat and disconnect it from the gunnel if I wanted to, and do whatever. And I really like that solution. This question, I didn't write it down, but I always see it on YouTube videos. I just kind of remembered it now, is we'll have a run of like 3 videos where I won't be using 360 and the questions will start coming. Why don't you use your 360? Well, it's not for every single situation. Obviously, what it's a stellar tool for is dissecting these large flats. And now you guys are seeing it. Maybe all summer you guys are commenting, "Oh, why don't you use your 360?" Well, now if you're watching the videos now, you're like, okay, that's what the 360 is really good at, and it is an absolute game changer when it comes to getting in shallow water and really picking apart schools of fish. I never thought, I know if you don't use it and you just use side imaging, you're probably thinking, man, I'm really efficient with my side imaging. I don't know if I need that. Well, I'm really efficient with my side imaging, and I can tell you this. If I was fishing a large, shallow sand flat or a weed edge, and I was spot locked, I found those fish with side imaging, I spot locked here, and I'm casting backwards, I would feel like I'm just wasting my time now because I don't know where those fish are anymore. I can't see them moving around. When you start running 360, you'll be amazed at how much these fish move. It'll blow your mind. 360, 100% worth it. Moving on. What do we got here? I think this is one of our last questions. You said in your video, when you were on leech, you were fishing a lot of sand. Why not rocks or weeds? So leech is one of my absolute favorite fisheries of all time. It's just really diverse. You have rocks, you have weeds, you have huge flats, you got some deep structure. You got like Walker Bay that has all these deep rock humps. You got every kind of structural element you can imagine is on that lake. Big sand bays, big weed bays, big rock. It was just everything's in that lake, and that's what makes it really cool. Now, I always think back to like 20, 30 years ago, like let's say before side imaging. It was a lot more difficult to fish sand flats because there was no, if all you had was sonar and you're in 8 feet of water, like you're not going to mark those fish. There's no definable edge to anything. You know, like let's say you're fishing a rock bar and, you know, you're driving through looking at sonar and mapping and it comes up on this high spot and you're like, okay, this is where the fish is. It looks like a good spot. Sand, there's nothing like that. So what's happened now is if you're good at reading side imaging or 360, when you're fishing sand and there's no obstructions in the water, you can see every single fish for 120 feet on each side of your boat. So it makes finding these fish so much easier. Now, there's not generally as clean of an edge somewhere where you're going to see this huge pile of fish because there's not really a sweet spot a lot of times. But because you can see every single fish in that area, oh man, it is so dry in here. Because you can see every single fish in that area, it makes it super efficient to fish for them. So, you know, a lot of times like sand, I feel like used to be just avoided like the plague. Probably if you look at your map and it's just massively flat for miles and miles. You'd probably, 10, 15 years ago, you'd be like, I'm not going over there. That's too much needle and haystack fishing. Where now you can cruise through at 5 miles an hour running side imaging, cover that whole flat in an hour and be like, okay, there's fish over here and there's fish roaming over here. Get into that area with 360 and just make pinpointed cast. Every single cast you make is right in fish. So it's really opened up a lot of doors and it's made you a lot more efficient. And a lot of times I will seek out big sand flats. When fish are in a certain depth, like let's say fish are in a shallow water pattern and they're in 8, 9, 10 feet of water, I will seek out these huge sand flats because it's so easy to see the fish. So it almost turned into like a huge, massive time trap to going fishing sand to almost like let's go fish sand because it now cuts down the time because you can see so clearly. So that's kind of my take on that. Now, do weeds and rock hold fish? Absolutely, they hold fish. You can spend a little bit more time looking for them, but a lot of times they might be more concentrated. So that's kind of that. That's kind of the questions that I wrote down for this video. We didn't want to get too long. I wasn't sure how long I was going to go. What are we at? It says 20 minutes, but it's probably like 17 or 16 minutes or something like that. But I appreciate you guys watching this video. Back in about tomorrow, we'll definitely be filming something tomorrow. In fact, I would like to go to that deeper bite lake that's difficult. And all you river guys, don't worry. I would be at Pool 4 and the St. Croix River and Pool 3 like every single day right now because I love fishing rivers. But I've just been gone for way too long and I had to do a bunch of stuff around the house. So back for a little bit, filming some stuff locally, and then back on the road to some river systems. And I'm excited to show you guys some of that content. But thanks for the questions. Thanks for commenting. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for more content. We'll see you guys next time.